I mean, it's funny that like the idea, I don't know, it's funny. I never really thought about this, but the idea of an interview with like a celebrity or a famous person is sort of a funny idea because it's like, I mean, we can just talk about this, I guess. Like I'm interviewing you, quote unquote, because you're an excellent DJ and producer and you've got an album coming out and, you know, all of these great things the same way that a lot of people who are doing cool stuff get interviewed. But then there's sort of an unspoken thing that like, well, if you're getting interviewed, that must mean you're also great at talking and great at, you know, having flowery, well-composed thoughts at a moment's notice.
So. Yeah, not always the case, but
especially not for what we do.
Yeah, that's why we choose to do music, right?
Oh, dude, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I read recently someone was, God, I wish I could remember who said this, but it was basically that DJing is the perfect activity. It's the perfect thing for people to do who don't like going to parties, but really like hanging out with friends, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you get to go to the party, but you don't have to be like the guy at the party, you know?
Yeah. Or like, I suppose it also gives you something to do for people that are very activity driven. People that need things to do all the time. It's nice to be able to focus on something instead of a conversation where there's so many things you have to think about. And then the day after you're like, oh, should I have said that?
Yes, story of my life. I mean, is that you? Are you like an activity person? Do you do well with sort of like a single thing to focus on?
Yeah, I think so. I like, I mean, I think it all comes back to production too. I like messing with synths and knobs and all of that. So I think it's really nice to have something to do when I'm at a party. But sometimes it's also just nice to hang and be with friends, especially now that I've been touring more. It is nice to just have a night where you go out and you're like, okay, this is not work. As many years as I've told myself that the club is a workplace, I can actually go and enjoy myself for a night and not have to think about everything else that comes with it.
Dude, yeah. I mean, it's so nice too sometimes to get a reminder of why you do the work that you do, right? Because I've had, I'm sure, especially during the pandemic, probably a lot of producers had this experience, but you know, you sit in a room by yourself all day making music that's meant to be experienced by a large group of people in a loud environment. And so there's sort of this incongruous thing. And I don't know, even with certain songs, like I'll hear a song, maybe I'll hear a new song on a promo that some label sends. And I'll be like, I don't like the song, not for me. And then you go out and you hear it, like the place it's supposed to be played, the environment it's supposed to be presented. And I was like, oh, obviously this is, I'm an idiot. This is great. But, you know, I just didn't have the context for this.
Yeah, it's true. I feel that it's also a part of why there's like music that does really well on Spotify. And then on the dance floor, a lot of times it will just clear a room because it doesn't have that same energy. Or like, I don't know. Yeah, the context. It's everything, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, this actually, I didn't intend to do this, but this actually does make me think about your music and especially your new album, which I was just listening to. And I mean,
very nice.
Yeah. Oh, dude, it's great. The album's awesome. And I think by the time people hear this conversation, either it will already be out or about to come out. So I think we can talk about it as if it exists in the world.
Right.
but yeah, absolutely. And what I was going to say is that you have this really great balance between melodic elements, dreamier elements, more, I don't know, cinematic kinds of atmospheres that you're able to meld while still keeping a dance floor mentality. Like there was no point on the album where I was really thinking like, this wouldn't work on the dance floor. But then at the same time, your music for me really does touch a lot of deeper places and more like contemplative places than I think a lot of dance music producers' projects. I mean, is it something you think about? Does it just come naturally? Because you are very good at striking that balance.
I really appreciate you saying that. I definitely feel that groove is very important in music. I think when you go even to the dawn of human and dancing, it was really groove based, I imagine. Yeah, so that primal element is really important in production, I feel, for what I do. And I also think that it is important to separate, a dance record from like a club record versus a song that is just meant to be listened to and enjoyed. And I think the perfect like segue or the perfect meeting point between those two elements is like on a drive. If you're on like a long drive, you kind of want that more dancey feeling, and you also want maybe some of the more melodic listening parts as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and it does. You're right that when you're driving and you kind of have to concentrate on something mechanically too, I think it sort of allows your brain to just take in everything else as it comes to you, which is very similar to like a long dance floor experience where, if you've just been going for a couple hours, you're not necessarily getting impatient about, when's the next song going to come in? How long is this break? You're right that sometimes it takes something external to sort of snap you into that state.
I haven't been playing a lot of the records from the album because when I DJ sets, I want like the people that I'm fans of play much less melodic than I do. So it's kind of that influence and inspiration of the people that I'm fans of. And then, I think it goes also down the chain where like maybe people that are fans of me are also fans of people that I'm fans of. And it kind of creates this new world or new way of listening that, maybe isn't for those people that aren't fans of the people that I'm fans of. And I don't know. It's just,
I think I know what you mean. I mean, was there a thought? Because you've been putting out records for a long time. And I think I was going back too and listening to some of your earliest releases that are up on Spotify and all that. And I mean, you've always had a very well-defined sense of melody and emotion in your work. I mean, this is sort of a more broad question, not just about the album, but, over time, as you've sort of become yourself, settled into whatever it is that makes you sound like you, has there been moments of like, where do I fit in? Does this fit in? And that kind of thing. Because I think what you're talking about is that you've established a pretty unique place. And sure, you have contemporaries and other people who appreciate it and people who inspire you. And it's sort of a cycle of feedback. But at the same time, I always wonder for people who end up in a very specific musical sound, that path there, was it sort of a natural evolution or did you make some choices along the way?
So I think it's a bit of both. And early on, if you listen to my earlier records, they kind of fit into a specific kind of world, kind of like the NPCs and the Sound You Need. YouTube channels were really big at that time, and that's who was supporting the music. I was playing these shows, and I wasn't completely happy with the sound at the time. I felt like I had gotten in early enough to where I could be a trendsetter in the sound, but then I didn't feel the gusto to keep going in it. And so I kind of turned to the more, contemplative and deeper sort of sound. I think only maybe 2 or 3 years in to this project. And it was hard, because I lost a lot of the venues I was playing. Like I would play it once and I would play the darker sound and then they wouldn't book me again. And I knew at the time that it would be fine because this is 100% what I wanted to do. And that I knew that if I stuck with it, eventually it would come full circle. And so I feel like finally I have almost reached that point where people are booking me for what I want to play. And that's really nice.
Dude, absolutely. But I mean, we can summarize it quickly like that, but that's like a 10-year journey, right?
It is. It's almost exactly 10 years.
Wow.
To this year. Yeah. So it took a while. But it doesn't seem like so long, especially when I feel like I just live in the moment so much and I'm just focused on what's next all the time. So it's hard to think like, oh, that was 10 years of my life, but it's like, that's just how it breaks down,
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good way to look at it, man. If you're not, I think a lot of people fall prey to, projecting too far out into the future or getting frustrated that things aren't happening as fast as they want them to. And I mean, if you're able to be in the moment for the whole ride, that sort of eliminates those problems off the bat. Not that I'm not saying you never had those worries, but.
No, it's true. I mean, everything sits in a microcosm where like you do have all of those thoughts, but it's also at the same time, it's important to, I think, always challenge yourself and always have things that you aspire to become, like you have your long-term goals and then you can set easier goals in the interim and just keep achieving those goals over time. And, looking back 10 years, it's really amazing seeing how far I've been able to grow the project. And I know it's not as big as a lot of other people, but I'm really proud of the things that I've done and the music I've produced over time. So it's really nice.
Dude, that's beautiful. That just made me happy to hear you say that, because that's the real goal. I think at the end of it is to be proud of what you've done and to be able to keep doing what you like to do. I mean, what other kind of success could there be, really, at the end of the day? I think that's great. I mean, and another thing on that living in the moment and kind of smaller steps become bigger steps. I don't get too into like motivational speaker kind of talk, but the one thing it made me think of is, instead of like worrying about the past or worrying about the future, it's like, obviously we can't change the past, and the future is just going to be shaped by whatever you do in the present moment anyway. So, regardless of how much you plan for something or hope for something, the only thing that's going to make that happen is, what happens in the moment. And
yeah, I mean, I think if you can envision a life that you want for yourself, that's kind of half the battle, right? If you know what you want in the end, then every choice you make in life should be determined by that end goal, I feel. Obviously, things get in the way and it can get really difficult, but you should still keep that goal in mind.
Did you always know that this was what you wanted to do, more or less? Was music always the thing?
Yes and no. I mean, I like doing a lot of different things. I have a lot of different interests, but music was definitely the one thing I kept coming back to. Like, what about you? Like, what was your thing with like you were doing music, right? And then you started
and I still do music, although I took a little hiatus from releasing music, but yeah, I still am doing it, will be doing it. And for me, the podcast was kind of what we're talking about, I guess, is, in the moment, I was just a podcast nerd. I listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of comedians' podcasts, and I got really into hearing them talking about their little insular world and how it worked and peeking behind the curtain there. And as I'm sure you know, with any like artistic endeavor, there's so many parallels to what we do. And so I kind of started wondering like why no one was doing that for our world, like having these conversations, just because I liked listening to them. And that was kind of the impetus to start it. It wasn't that much more complicated. And yeah, it just grew over time, man. I liked doing it and people seemed to like listening to it. And yeah, that's kind of how it started.
Do you have any like all-time favorites? I was listening to one of the podcasts and you're talking about how you who was that you met on a plane?
Paul Oakenfold.
Yeah, Paul Oakenfold. And yeah. I know you probably don't want to bring it up, but
no. Yeah, I trot this story out all the time.
You had him on the podcast, right?
I did.
So it's really amazing to have that full circle moment.
It was incredible. And what was the best part of that, dude? The best part of that. Wait, what'd you say?
Well, you didn't you weren't like, hey, I have a podcast, you should come on, right?
Right. And no. Yeah, it just happened. It just happened naturally, which was great. And you're absolutely right. It was a cool full circle moment. But I did bring up that story to him of meeting him on the plane. He didn't remember any of it at all. It's just even better.
Yeah, I feel like when the moment I walk into an airport, I turn into an NPC. I'm just like fully driven. Like I need to get on my flight. How can I pass the time? Like I need to get my water, get my coffee, download my shows on Netflix, and then, make sure my battery's charged on my laptop. And then, I just like every bullet point needs to be checked off. And then someone comes up and talks to me. I'm like, whoa, this was not part of the plan.
Oh no. Yeah. No, I was not really in the right for talking to him at all. Cause I knew, obviously he didn't want anyone to talk to him. I will say we didn't talk long. I kept it very brief. He was fine. No, he was very nice, but I did realize later, I mean, it's Paul Oakenfold. So like, especially at the height of his career, I mean, he was a full-fledged celebrity. He's hanging out with Madonna and U2 and like, so I think he had a period in his life.
90s or like early 2000s?
Yeah, right around there, like mid 90s to early 2000s, I think.
That era of music was so badass.
Dude.
A lot of inspiration from that time on the album, for sure.
I could definitely hear some 90s rave influences for sure. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's a bunch of diverse influences, honestly. I guess I'm always curious when those influences come into play and you've kind of got them on display. Is that an intentional thing where you're saying, I haven't dug into this area, let me emphasize it? Or is it just kind of like naturally you were listening to it, it bleeds in, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's maybe a bit of both. I think it does just naturally bleed in. You listen to a sound, you're like, oh, that's 303. I love that. And I love how distorted it is. Let me try and make my own version. And, it just kind of comes naturally. I think the beauty of when you've been producing for so long, a lot of the barriers of production just become very natural and easy for you to maneuver across. So, for instance, like sometimes just starting to make a song can come very easily and you don't have to think, and just kind of a lot of the elements you're listening to will just come through, and you don't have to think like, oh, that is that synth. Over after a long period of time, you could just like, oh, that's a saw wave, whatever. You just pull it up and it sounds kind of like it. And yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's cool that now that you're saying that, it's like, yeah, there are some lines of continuity too, because it's not necessarily just referencing a sound from a different era. But I mean, if you're using the same piece of gear, it's literally, the same equipment that somebody...
Instrument, right? Like how many times do people have a guitar
right
on a rock record?
Yeah, that's so funny. I never really thought about that, but you're right. It's the same instrument. So it's...
I think the whole idea of like someone claiming a synth to be like, oh, I use that sound, you can't use it.
Right.
It's kind of whatever. It's kind of outdated. Like maybe at the start, like, yeah, and I think maybe they should be mentioned and credited, but it's just kind of like they're the inspiration for it, and that's great, and they have that legacy. What more do you need beyond that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that, I think at least for knowledgeable people or people who care about the lineage of these kinds of sounds, anytime someone new uses those sounds, at least for me, I think about the people who popularized those sounds or the people who pioneered those sounds. I mean, anytime, like, I don't know, anytime I hear like an M1, I just think about Show Me Love and Robin S.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to like pass down the torch. You don't want to lose these incredible moments in music. I think it's really nice to be able to reuse them and recreate with them, rather than like you could sample the same song and people still do that. Well, they'll sample songs from 20, 30 years ago and just use the same exact sample, or you can just use the synth and make your own song out of it. And what's the difference,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think both ways are fine. And it's really more about sort of how 100%. Creative you are with it, Because I've heard songs that just totally use the old sample that I ended up thinking were more creative than, say, a song that just used the instrument, but maybe kind of just played something that was close to the original melody. And it's kind of just like you're not really reinventing anything with it. And then on the other hand,
whole package, right?
Even
before, it's like the context is everything, and how much, work goes into it, or how much, detail you can pull from it and things like that.
Absolutely. And then on the other hand, I've heard people just yank samples from another era and throw them into a modern context, kind of with no more thought than that. And that can sound super corny and played out too. I mean, House went through a little bit of that in the last couple of years with, all the old R&B vocals, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wasn't keeping so up to date with a lot of it.
Yeah, it's not exactly your
I heard it through the grapevine. Yeah, like read on Twitter sometimes, be like, oh yeah, yep, that's happening.
Yeah. I mean, it's not anything you needed to be monitored. You didn't miss much.
It's okay. I mean, that's the beauty of creating something that you really feel in tune with. It's like, before I would be really up, and before I mean like 9 years ago, I would be really up to date with all of the different music trends and things like that. And now I find myself just less and less updated with a lot of that stuff. And it's nice to have kind of this sub universe of music that just fits in a different world. I don't know how else to describe it. It's nice that it's music that I like to listen to and music that I like to play. And there's fans, like maybe not a lot of fans of it in certain worlds, but it's just nice to have, feel like I found a home, I guess you could say.
Dude, yeah. And it's funny you say that, because I wrote this down before we got on the call here. And I feel like right now is a really good time for the kind of music you're making. And especially like this album, I don't know. It seems like in the last couple of years, there's been a renewed interest, maybe just more people checking in with like the deeper side of house and techno and the more melodic side. A lot of people, I mean, Tulum and all that sort of thing. Like there's maybe some less cool or more service level people checking in too, but I think it kind of grows the fan base for everybody. I don't know. It's just, for me, it was interesting because I don't know if that's for you, like rising to meet that moment, or if it's just kind of a happy coincidence that like you've sort of intersected the trend at the time you're putting out this great album. You know what I mean?
Well, I appreciate you calling it great.
It is, man.
And yeah, I feel that like it doesn't, like, music is universal, and it doesn't matter who connects with it, like how cool they are. And I never want music to feel like I listen to this music and that's what makes me cool, even though we're kind of taught that growing up. And there is a phase in like middle school and high school where how cool you are is determined by what the music you listen to. But as an adult, who cares? You know, most people stop finding new music by the age of 30. So to have people that are 30 plus finding new music, how uncool as they may be, that's still cool in and of itself, you know?
Yeah.
I think
absolutely. Yeah. No, and those people were not the people I was talking about at all. I mean, it's more kind of the like.
Like even people that are like chasing the party, right? They're chasing the party and they're chasing the, you know, the very, like you said, surface level things. But at the same time, there is a chance that those people going to those parties can lose themselves in a moment and wake up. You know, they can be like, wow, like this thing I was doing was not cool at all. And this, you know, world around me that I'm enveloping myself in is showing me that, you know?
And you know what you just made me realize is actually we need all of those people for a healthy dance music ecosystem. The people chasing the parties,
100%.
If we didn't have them, I mean, there'd be nothing, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're carrying all of us. So never mind. Forget what I said. They're great.
No, but there are times when, you know, someone leans over to you and they maybe have bad breath or something. They're trying to talk to you and you're like,
the worst.
Like, oh, dude, like, I don't know.
Dude, what is it? The bad breath in the club thing is like this. It's always been a thing. I've never fully understood. It's just, I don't know. It's always been a pet peeve of mine is bad breath in the club. And it's something about it is associated with like a long night of raving. I don't know if they're just certain.
It's usually like dinner into club and not having any, you know, break in between then. So there's no toothbrushing going on.
If that for sure. I mean, are there, I don't know this. I have no evidence for this, but I feel like maybe there's certain drugs that make your breath smell bad too.
I haven't thought about that either. Yeah, it's true. It's true. It might be.
I don't know what it would be. I don't know. I feel like, again, this is correlation. It's not causation, but I feel like I've talked to a lot of people who are obviously very coked up who also had bad breath. And I'm not saying they had bad breath.
I think a lot of it is just a lack of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with a lot of people that like to go out too as well. But I think it's, at the end of the day, like, I've never had a situation where it's been so bad that I couldn't maneuver myself out of the situation. It's almost always very easy to just kind of laugh and be like, yeah, great. And then kind of move over to the other side of the club.
Well, that's a soft skill of the professional DJ that I think we don't talk about enough is you get very good at sort of moving through the club, kind of like water, you know? Anytime you need to make a move, you can kind of just fluidly get there.
I think it just takes a lot of time in empty clubs. Once you see a club when it's empty, you'll know exactly where all of the passageways are. And
you create little mental maps in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Well, we were saying a second ago about all of these different inspirations for you, maybe some sonic or at least nostalgic references on the album. And I wanted to ask, I mean, everything from listening to your music, talking to you, the research I was doing before, I mean, it seems like you have a very diverse range of sounds and music and styles that influence you. And also like a maturity to it. Like it seems like, you know, we're talking about the history of where songs come from and what synth was used to make this song from the 90s, that kind of thing. Like, where does that sort of, that want of going deeper come from? Like, have you always been the person who was just listening to everything and kind of diving in like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think even in high school or middle school, I was the one that, I think in middle school, I was the one that downloaded Fruity Loops and I would mess around with it. And then in high school, I would always be the one just like dissecting music in my head, where whatever people were listening to. And I think it's just kind of always how my mind's been. I haven't been able to figure out why or how, just kind of the way I grew up.
And is this in Florida?
Yeah, I grew up in Florida, in Fort Myers.
And tell me about Fort Myers, because Fort Myers is on the coast, right?
Yeah, it's on the West Coast. And so the West Coast is on the Gulf of Mexico. And so the water is very calm. And so not a lot of, so there's a lot of beach, but not a lot of surfing, a lot more boating. It's more of like a boating culture.
Right.
And I think growing up, I was more averse to that world. And now when I go home and, friends are out on boats and stuff, I'm like, just get me on the water. so nice.
It's in your blood.
Like
yeah. You can only resist it for so long.
Exactly. And it's nice, it's kind of quaint. You feel like growing up, there's maybe not a whole lot to do. I think music was a really good escape from just kind of like the slowness of that city. Yeah, I would always just be wanting to make beats all the time, just making songs and beats.
I mean, when you first downloaded Fruity Loops in middle school, I guess 2-part question, what did you intend to make with it? And what did you make with it?
So bad. I was listening to like Bass Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
Bass Hunter and like Digitalism.
Oh,
I
nice.
think that was kind of popular. And I guess that would have been more in like high school. But yeah, it was like just like really bad. I was just downloading and like playing. I think it comes with whatever the free song that came on it. But I don't remember who made it, but I was obsessed with that. I was like, how did he make this? It's so cool.
Just the demo song. I love
that. The demo song. I was like, this is so sick. I was never able to reverse engineer it at the time.
I like the idea that I really like the idea that they shipped it with the best song that's ever been made on it. It's like,
I don't know about that. There's been a lot. I know a lot of producers that use Fruity Loops that are pretty good. But
of course, no, I'm joking. But
I know.
Yeah.
That's a good joke. That's a really good song.
Yeah, that's the hallmark when the joke is not that good, is when someone says that's a really good joke.
No. Not true. I just remember there was like some vocal chop they did, and I was just blown away by it, and it gave me the feeling,
Right.
And that's kind of the feeling that when you listen to music that has that emotion, it gives you the little goosebumps. And I know some people don't get goosebumps when they listen to music, but I think certain songs I definitely do, especially in the right mindset, right context.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I have gotten goosebumps. I'll get the like almost like about to cry feeling a lot.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Just like
that's
out of
really
nowhere.
Nice.
Yeah. But it's kind of the same thing, just like it provokes a body reaction kind of thing. But I mean, were you always writing music? Because you played piano like early on, right? Like, what was the first thing you wrote, or that you remember like trying to write your own music?
Oh yeah, so I've never been like a writer per se, but I've been more of like I would consider myself more of a jammer. So I would be like just playing improv stuff. And I think that's kind of how my process is even today. I just kind of jam and hit the record button and just hit stuff and then see what comes out at the end, and then reverse it, loop it, pitch it up, pitch it down until, I get something that I like. I even remember my first piano lessons, maybe like a couple years in, I would be playing, I would have a set amount of time that I had to practice every day, but I hated playing the songs that I was assigned. So I would just play what I wanted. I would start the song and maybe I would play it a couple times, and then I would probably take those chords or I'll just improv on whatever song it was. And then I would go back at the end of the week, and my teacher would always get really mad. Like, you didn't practice this at all. My parents would be like, what do you mean? He's been practicing all week, That's the same. Now I don't have to do that anymore. So that's kind of nice. But
yeah, in a way, I feel like your teacher should have been impressed in a way that, you were.
Yeah, but I would have never show her the jams. So she has right to, I would just play the song badly. And I would, I would just play it, but she'd be like, that's not how it goes. And you're right.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, you're right.
I think in the end, I would always pull through, but I just need deadlines, This is when the performance date is, okay, and then you have to get it done by that time.
Is it the same for writing music now? Will you just
in a way,
yeah.
Yeah, because I really like to set deadlines for pretty much anything. So when I first had the idea to do the album, I was 29 and some change. And then I knew I wanted to finish an album by the time I was 30. It's like a big turning point.
Yeah.
And so I had been making music for so long. I was like, okay, by the time I'm 30, I should write an album. I got the skeleton of the album together pretty quickly. I want to say maybe 3 or 4 months. Over time, I would just, as I played more shows, I would buy more pieces of gear. And then I would go back for every piece of gear that I bought. I would go back through every song on the album and record new parts over it. And so it's kind of like, I said this before in an interview, it's kind of like the fable of stone soup. Where, the guy has soup with just a stone, just water and stone, and people come by and they offer their, whatever they got. And that's kind of like the synths or, piece of gear that I got were like offering their services to my album. And that's kind of how it all came together in the end, at least.
Well, and that's actually a pretty cool way to think about bringing a disparate group of songs together as a single body of work, is that it's not that they necessarily have to be tied by a singular sound or tempo or any of that, but that it's, if the same piece of gear is appearing on all of these tracks, I think even for the lay person who might not know or care about any of that, there's a certain aesthetic that gets imprinted onto those songs, right? That they all kind of share because they all have sounds coming from the same device. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's true. I agree. I think I feel every sound and every synth in my kit has a specific thing that it's really good at. And so I kind of use them for those specific things, more or less. It would be fun, because I would save up enough money and I'd buy something and I'd be like, have a field day just recording a bunch of stuff on it. And it was kind of right up until the deadline, the final deadline when I had to turn in the album. I think it was maybe 2 weeks before I bought this. I bought the Digitone, and there was a few songs that just weren't quite there for me, and I recorded some stuff on the Digitone, and I was like, that's it. Pencils down.
That's beautiful, man. And I think, this, not to get too hippie of an idea in here too, but I mean, if that's fun for you, if that's what you have the most fun doing, is you get a new piece of gear and all of a sudden it opens up this new world that you can play around in. I feel like some of that has to get imprinted on the music too, right? If like this is the sound of like you playing with this new thing for the first time, something in that spirit I feel like has to end up in the music.
Yeah, I think there is something of like a honeymoon phase when you get a piece of gear, and there is something magical about that. But also, there is something to be said about a piece of gear that you know front to back. And I try not to make a habit of buying a new piece of gear without having fully invested into the prior purchase.
It's a good call.
So like, I think it's important. Like I try to get as nerdy as I can when I get a piece of gear, like really look at all of its functionality, and I'll like read the manual before I go to bed. That's my nighttime reading. And,
yeah, that paints a picture, man.
Yeah. And so, but then you get, you really understand it on a deep level, and you understand what it can do and maybe what it actually excels at.
You just made me think of one in the first year I did the podcast. One of the first people I talked to from a completely different world than yours was Hero Bust, who makes like insane dubstep sounds. And he said more or less the exact same thing. I forget the exact phrasing he used, but especially at that time, he was starting to get known for this really unique style in dubstep, and really like the sounds he was making were just, you'd never heard them before. It was that kind of thing. And that's more or less the exact same thing he said, was like, you have to, he's like, a lot of people learn, 70 to 80% of a synth's capability. I learn 95 to 100%. And that's why I can, sound the way I do and sound the way that other people don't. And it's absolutely right, man. It's like, it's the harder road. So I understand when, a lot of people will just buy the next thing. But
yeah, that's true. I mean, the honeymoon phase works. So like a lot of people, they get that new piece of gear, and I feel like there is some sort of magic around something new and exciting. And it's like this kind of feedback loop where you end up creating something that can be really exciting. But then sitting with a piece of gear, like, I don't know if you ever really truly unlock 100% of it. And I feel like there is absolutely timeless records that have been made on like the most whatever cheapest pieces of gear of all time. And the sounds are simple. Like, music doesn't have to be so complex, and I always want to stress to people that it's not like there's no secret. Like, for me personally, I don't really have any secrets. Like, if someone was to ask me, oh, like, how did you make this? I would tell them exactly how I did it. And I think in music in general, there's not really any secrets. It's just spending time, like anything else. Like, if you want to get big, and you got to go to the gym every day. And if you want to get good at cooking, you got to cook every night. It's a lot of that,
Well, and also sticking to what you really think is significant, what really speaks to you, right? Like, I'm thinking now of you talking earlier about your own journey, and that, you sort of had this confidence that this is what you wanted to do, and this was the music that really excited you, so that even before things, caught a spark, or when things were moving slower, you were still on that path because, that's sort of just who you are, and doing anything else kind of, it doesn't make sense logically,
Right. I think it's just about being excited about something, I just had something I was excited about, and then I was like, yeah, every day I would wake up and want to go for it. And, I'd listen to music that inspired me, and, I'd even like drag it into Ableton and try to recreate it.
Dude, that's what it is. That's absolute. Excitement is contagious. Excitement is contagious, man. It's like especially like creative energy, when you can really tell that somebody's like got something, that they're onto something, that they're like really locked in. I mean, for me, that's the most. I don't even care what it is. I just want to watch them to see what they're gonna do. You know?
Yeah, I think so. I have been. I feel like I've been producing for a long time, and now I'm like really excited about DJing and being a very good and skilled DJ. Man, there's like just some guys out there that are just monsters. They're so good. They like, I feel like they just live in dance clubs or something because they just get it. I don't know. I think it's probably a combination of having done it for so long, and then I think about guys like Carl Cox. You know, it's just like such good DJs. And I was watching some, like, I think this is Dance Revolution in 2001, Carl Cox, and it was just like,
oh yeah,
those records that he was playing then are timeless. Like I could rip a song and slow it. I mean, they were playing music at 145 BPM, but if you take it and play it at 125, it sounds like any other record you would play today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dude, I mean, yeah, there's certain legends. I mean, if you go back and watch like old videos of like Jeff Mills DJing back in the day, you know, he's on like 3, maybe 4 turntables, all vinyl, and he moves so fast. It's like, to me, it's insane. It has to be all instinct. Like
100%. I mean,
the things he's doing are so fast. There's no way you could even plan for it.
Yeah, and luckily now you don't need that same level of technical skill. But to keep the party going, I feel that there is still a big skill in like when the next record comes in, you know, and playing. And also playing on the fly, I think is really important for me, and not pre-planning so much. And I know in the festival circuit, it's like almost unheard of to just completely play on the fly. Like you pretty much have your cue points of when the next song needs to come in. But I just want to know my music well enough to know, you know, when the song is going to stop, when the next one needs to come in, and then like which keys kind of mesh with each other and things like that.
Yeah, dude. And the festival thing is funny because to me, that's one of those like groupthink things where it's just like we all sort of know that you're supposed to plan festival sets out and have them all completely time coded and synced and all that. But to me, I don't know, man, because I'm the same as you. Like, I was a DJ first. I grew up DJing. I never pre-planned anything. And then when the sort of EDM boom happened and everyone's sets were becoming much more structured that way, it was sort of confusing to me at first. And I got on board and I totally get the benefits of it. But for me, it's always more electric and the potential for anything to happen. It's like, it's part of why I like DJing. And I think there is a way to split the difference. I was talking, do you know Spencer Brown?
Oh yeah, of course, good friend.
Yeah, he's a great dude. I was talking to him about his last tour, which
he's very adamant about this. I know he brings up this subject a lot, right?
Yeah. No, he likes to rant about this, and which I appreciate. But his last tour, I think, was kind of his biggest tour he's done, and he brought in a bunch of production and including some visuals that were like time coded to specific songs. And he was sort of talking about how he squared that with the rest of what he does. And the way he kind of talked about it was like, he sort of knew like kind of where the energy would start, where it would build to eventually, and then eventually kind of how it would wind down. And so he'd have, you know, maybe like point A, point B, point C of moments that he knew he would hit at some point. And those would be the moments where like all the production was synced. And then I think it was just sort of a matter of like working with his LD and visuals people to kind of, you know, just have a understanding that like this is mostly improv, but eventually, you know, when you hear this or when I give some signal, that's when we lock into this for a few minutes and then we go off again.
And I feel like the LD, like the people in front are just the absolute unsung heroes of the dance floor. Like whenever I play a club and the lighting guy is popping off, you could tell it's just the vibe is so good. And you can play you can play anything and they'll make it sound massive. You know, I could play a super chill song, they'll just make it feel so fun in the club. And it's like, I'm like, what I did was probably 40% of what made the experience so good.
Oh my God. Yeah. And especially for higher end clubs that have the capability to, you know, completely just go nuts with production and lighting and all that, that you really need someone who can, it's the same thing we were just talking about with synths. Like you need someone who knows all the capabilities, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I always try to make it a point to go and thank the lighting guy after my set. Because like a lot of times they're moving more than I am. Like, having such a good time with it. Oh, like this guy's such a legend. It makes it sound so good.
And it really is, you're completely right. It really is a collaborative performance with you and them and, you know, the rest of like the sound staff and all that. But it is funny because even when you don't even meet them or talk to them, when you go on, it's still a collaborative performance. You know?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, too, I also think it's something that people don't even realize or notice until they do something wrong. They like, you just think when you go to a club that it's all automated until it's like completely off. Like if some lighting guy completely misses the drop or something, then it's like, oh, come on, lighting guy.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, back there busting their ass and,
oh, man. No, they're the unsung heroes. Absolutely.
They really are.
Yeah.
Shout out to all the lighting guys out there.
Shout out to all the lighting guys.
That love their job and love what they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just the other night, I was out, I saw my buddy Peekaboo play at this big club here called Echo Stage. I don't know if you've been.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I played last year.
Yeah. Great club, you know, massive.
Really awesome.
Yeah, massive sound, massive production. And Aaron, my boy Aaron Gold, was doing Peekaboo's like lighting, and he designed the whole show. And we were up in the balcony watching it go off. And I was just asking him about different moments in the show and all that. And at a certain point, I was just like, man, this is a guy also, I've known him since he was like 18 years old and just like running around in the clubs. But I was just like, it is fucking crazy that you put all of this together. You know, it's like, because the whole show would be so different without that, you know, like it would have so much less impact.
I think when I played Echo Stage, it was maybe the LD was to keep it really tame and chill because nothing really crazy happened. And I was like, man, the lights could have been like a little more wild, I think, for this show.
Were you opening? I feel like they hold
I think
production.
I was opening. It was
feel like
maybe like third in line or something.
I have no evidence for this, but I feel like they hold production back for openers, and it's kind of a shitty move.
Yeah, but it's like I could have also hired my own lighting person, and they would have gone back there and crushed it for me. You know, it's also my own fault in a way too. You know, there's
but also, I mean, again, it's expensive too.
I mean, I guess responsibility in a way.
Right. Well, and I'm just saying, like, I don't want to set an expectation for like young artists that everyone needs that right away. But if you go into a club and you haven't been there and you don't have a team with you, you can absolutely go talk to the lighting guy or girl and just be like, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm playing tonight. You know, just wanted to introduce myself. And if you have some ideas or like a vibe you want, you can tell them, or you can just ask them what they're thinking.
It's not automated. It's people doing it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times I feel like they like that. And, you know, I was playing an event that was, I think they probably gave them the instruction to be more tame, because I think the event I was playing is like more chill kind of music in general. But I just feel like even with chill music, you don't want the light to be so stagnant and gradient. You do want some of those flashing moments and things like that. Because it really adds to the ambiance, even if it is chill, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
the contrast can be something really nice too.
Yeah, that's I think one of the best parts about playing deeper music and, music that takes its time a little more is that, when bigger moments happen, it's so much more impactful, and the lights could do the same thing. That's absolutely true. I mean, for you, as long as we're talking about DJing, so you downloaded Fruity Loops as a middle schooler. When did you start DJing?
I didn't start DJing till I got to college. I went to University of Florida, and I was 18, and I think I just went to some clubs around there. And then there's one club in particular that I really liked the DJ, and I think I just like introduced myself after, and I never really heard anything back. But then I would just put out music on SoundCloud, and then like through the grapevine at the university, and like the scene down there is really small. I eventually got a gig there, and then the same guy who I hit up, he kind of took me under his wing and showed me how to DJ. And his name is VJ. Shout out VJ. He's a really good DJ. He still lives in Gainesville, kind of runs the scene down there. And he's a good dude. I'm actually going to play in Gainesville to see him on this tour. So very excited.
That's great. That's great, man. And was it the kind of thing that, if the scene was small, I can imagine, was it like a weekly part? Like you'd see the same people at the club every week, that kind of thing? Like they feel like a community?
Saturday. Yeah, Neon Liger was the name of the party.
Oh, yeah. I know that party. I remember that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd play there, and good times. What kind of
music were you playing or was playing at
like
the party?
It's just like hard stuff, just like at the time it was all EDM. That was what was really popular. I was really young. And then I would remember sometimes he would book like really cool DJs, and the turnout would be like not very good. And they would be kind of slow nights, but I would always go, and he would have me open for these guys, and that was really cool. So I learned how to open a room there. I played there a lot. And in any case, I think learning how to open a room is really important, playing from nothing. Absolutely. And anytime I get the chance, even now, I'm always really stoked about it. So,
dude, absolutely. Yeah. Opening a room is a very important skill to have. I think it teaches you so much about, because when you have, say 20 people in front of you instead of 200 or whatever it is, those 20 people become so important to you as a DJ. And I think it really forces you to lock into whatever's going on with them at the time. And, at least for me, like as a DJ, I'm just trying to figure out like what is going to make you happy right now? Like whether it's something you're expecting or not, like what is something you're going to connect to that I can do? And I think when you really focus on individuals like you are when you're opening, it's a strong skill building thing to do.
Yeah, it's true. It's not for the faint heart.
It's not always fun.
The faint of heart. Yeah, it's not always fun. But in any case, like a lot of times you can just play music that you like to listen to at home. I think it's a great way to open a room because there's not a whole lot of people, and it doesn't need to be so hype. And I mean, it just depends. If you like listening to really hard stuff at home, right, all power to you. Maybe don't open a room with that stuff. Yeah. There's a time and place. That's kind of where I learned to, play disco starting, or like minimal house stuff. And there was the kind of like EDM night. And then after maybe a couple of years, we started the Deep End. There's this party called the Deep End, and that's when we would be able to play like Disclosure and stuff as the headlining set, and that was like, ooh, like wow, we go back to back all night, and that was really fun. Yeah, I remember just wanting to listen to, deeper music pretty early on. Like pretty much just because. So I'm originally I was born in Italy, and I have a lot of family over there in Florence, and we would go back every couple of years. And my cousins, when I was 14, brought me to a discotheque, and it was all super minimal techno, and that's what they were listening to in Italy at the time. And man, it was just, I was just dancing like crazy. I was just like some 14-year-old kid on the dance floor, like going nuts.
Sounds great.
So much fun. And I think as I got more into electronic music, I forgot about those days. And then I remember one of the DJs I opened for, they were just like ranting after the night. I don't remember who it was, but they were like, you have to stick to your roots, in music, whatever you do. And then I started thinking, and I'm like, what are my roots musically? And then I thought about that night at the discotheque, and I started digging back into the records that my cousin gave me at that time, which were like Cocoon Compilation G is a big one I reference from 2006 or 2007. And
I don't think I know that one.
It's Sven Bot's record label, and he does a compilation, Sven Bath, I believe.
Yeah.
He does a compilation every year. And my cousins call him that. That's why I said that. I could just hear it in their Italian.
That's hilarious.
And so his compilation, and he does it, I think it's every year. And still to this day, it's like always the most cutting edge, like really amazing, deep house, techno, electronic music. And yeah, it was just that kind of spawned a lot of the direction for me musically from that point on. And that's kind of where I am now.
Yeah, which is cool because that sounds like an early experience where sort of that body reaction we were just talking about, where just unexpectedly you hear something for the first time and just have this reaction unprompted. And that's really smart, I think, as a creative person making music, to think about the moments like that you've had in your life and what was it about that prompted it. And yeah, that's very smart, man, to think about that. Because if it just made you have that reaction, then, something in that, maybe if you can learn whatever that was or take something from it, maybe you can, manufacture that moment,
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. That would be nice. I think the thing is, it's like everything changes, too. I feel like maybe like the sound in Europe and stuff, especially in different clubs, it's like different things become popular and things change over time. But like I said, like I think, well, I guess what we were speaking about earlier, going deeper and finding the root of certain sounds, or, when things were originally sampled, I think it can show you a lot. It can bring a lot of inspiration, if you're stuck and you don't know what to make, maybe some of the stuff you like, maybe look at what they're interested in and things like that, and just keep going further down that rabbit hole. And I'm sure you'll probably find something that you like in that as well.
Dude, absolutely. That always used to be the SoundCloud hack, was like whoever you liked on SoundCloud, you would then look at the songs that they liked. And that was, as a DJ, that was a really good way to find new music.
100%. Yeah.
Well, and this kind of ties into one of the last things I wanted to ask you, was that, you're in Florida, you're making music, putting up on SoundCloud, DJing at the weeklies, and eventually you get out to LA and you start working at OWSLA, right?
Yeah. So
that just as a transition point, I find really interesting. I'd love to hear that experience, but just kind of what we're talking about as far as like finding your sound, but then also being on the other side of it and like watching a lot of other people try to find their sounds and seeing how a label sort of integrates that into the business side of it. and how it, it was kind of from start to finish, like how the product is made. I think that's a really
that was really
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. I think getting to view music on the business side really helped to understand how to build the business, helped me to understand how to build a business doing music full time. It was always kind of a dream of mine to do music full time. It's like you're taught like, oh, you go to school, you go to college, you get a job. It was the moment I was originally going to school for computer engineering. And it was the moment that I realized that I really wanted to do music full time. I switched my major to advertising, which was known to be a very easy major. And I spent all of my free time making music and meeting people in music. At the time, there was a startup in Gainesville called Groove Shark. It was kind of like a Spotify before Spotify was in the US. And through there, I met. So I was an intern for this guy Blaze.
Yeah, Blaze,
and he was hired as the manager for the label manager for OWSLA. And I was like, please let me work for you. I love this label. Let me. I'll do anything. And so I ended up working there, and then as an intern. And I kind of restructured their whole file sharing system. And, it was to the point where I was so on top of things. Like anyone would email me for any sort of file and I would send it to them within 2 minutes. I was like always so on top of it. And then I think classes started getting, picking up again, and I wasn't as responsive. And they're like, we need to move this guy out here and hire him full time. So it's kind of like, I think with any kind of startup position, a good friend of mine taught me you have to make your own job and you have to make yourself indispensable, or else there's no reason to have you on the team. So
that's absolutely right.
That was kind of the way it happened. And I moved out to LA, and I very quickly realized that I just wanted to make music, and I had seen enough of the industry. And so I quit and just went for it. And I met a lot of great friends, people I'm still really good friends with. And it just kind of evolved from there. It was like I quit and I instantly went from having a job to just being this starving artist. And I wouldn't give it up for anything. It was really tough, but it still got me to where I am today. And I learned a lot of things along the way as well. So.
But it's a scary moment, man. I mean, if I put myself in your shoes at that time, to be in LA where it's all happening, to be working at OWSLA, which is, as far as like name recognition and just like cultural cachet, it's like one of the hottest things happening. So like there's a certain status attached to it. And then to yourself decide to leave and become, sort of part of the faceless mass of people trying to make it in LA. At least personally, I think I would be scared to make that leap.
I think it ties back to what I was saying with knowing what you want for your life, and every choice that you make having to be with that end goal in mind. And so I knew I wanted to make music full time. And it was also a kind of thing where I did want to go part-time, and they just wouldn't have me part-time. Yeah. And I think it was kind of like a thing of like, you're either going to sink or swim, and you got to just go for it because no one else makes it any other way. So you have to do it that way. It's kind of like,
it makes total sense. And from their perspective too, I get it, because I think the reason they got to that cultural level that I was talking about is everyone there at a certain point, that was their entire life, It was like a singular focus.
Yeah.
When you think about your time there, what do you remember? Like, what sticks with you from that? Because that's being part of like a pretty significant cultural moment.
I think I just remember being really young and like naive as well with that. When I got hired, I pretty much, so I used the rest of my FAFSA money. I don't know if I should say this, but I used the rest of my loan money on a ticket to Holy Ship. And
Nice.
I took my 2 bags that I was moving with to California on Holy Ship. And then I went straight from Holy Ship to Los Angeles. And that was, I was like, okay, this is my life. This is all I have.
Amazing.
And then that was probably like the first leap of faith. And then, quitting was the next big one. But I think every time I've been faced with, a big change, and I've taken the more dangerous route, I've always felt more rewarded.
I think that's generally true in life too. I mean, because there is maybe an alternate reality version where you sort of stayed in comfort at OWSLA and kept working there and rose through the ranks, whatever that means at the time.
I keep making music. I could have easily kept making music on the side and
But, eventually, I think that's part of what we started off this conversation talking about. It's like that to me is maybe not being in the moment. And then you wake up a few years later and sort of realize that what you're doing isn't necessarily the thing that most fulfills you or wasn't exactly, really what you had in mind for this. And if you're not, making conscious decisions every step of the way, I think it really is easy for people to get thrown off course.
It's true. And I mean, there's always that fear factor, and getting past that is always easier said than done. I knew I wanted to be waking up every day to something like this. And I feel so happy that I made the choices that I did.
That's great, man. Yeah, I mean, that's super inspirational to hear you talk about. And am I right too? Did I read that while you were at OWSLA, you were also at least partially responsible for a lot of the demo submissions, listening to music that people were sending in?
So many demos. Oh yeah, yeah. I'm like, I feel like I can listen to music for like 2 seconds and tell you if it's good or not. Like,
that's a skill too, yeah.
It takes time. But I was listening to like thousands of demos. Yeah. It was this weird thing where people thought you could just get on the label and then your career would be set. And a part of that at that time was true. But I think, like anything, it's just they were putting out a lot of music, and over time it's just like if you put out too much music, it gets diluted maybe. I don't know. Just depends on like how you want to run a business and like how you can make money from that. Running a label is so tough, especially if you have employees, people working for the label. Like,
oh, dude,
at the end of the day, there's a line that's like net profits.
Well, of course, and I mean, they were, they had an explosion. They were growing as an entity, and I think just like any company, any business, anything like that, you can, you can sort of grow so quickly and try to lean into that growth. And I'm not necessarily saying that this is what happened with OWSLA, but like, I think it's very possible in that situation where it kind of gets away from you, where it's like the thing that made people excited about you in the first place can maybe get lost as everything gets bigger and bigger. And then eventually, you're like, wait, what are we?
Because I originally remember when it first came out, it was like this super group of producers, it was maybe like a handful of folks. And it was like this, like, and then over time, it became more of a traditional label. And I think that's fine too. I think it really pushed forward the electronic music scene in a lot of ways. And it was really cool to be around for that time. It was like a lot of moving parts. I remember filling in a lot of different roles, a lot of all-nighters, getting certain things, and meeting deadlines and things like that. And I worked hard, but I think for me, by the time I'm done with something, it's very hard for me to put any effort into it. As bad as that is maybe to say.
But it's just like a switch.
Once my heart's out, I'm out. Yeah, I'm like, there's nothing for me to give.
No, I think that's good though, to be aware when that moment happens. I think 100%. Is a very good thing.
Yeah, very true.
This is the last question I'll ask about it, but when you were listening to demos, I guess it's two-part question. One, did you end up finding anything that eventually got platformed on the label? And two, kind of more general, like in all of that listening, all of these people trying to get their demos heard, does anything stand out to you as far as advice for good ways to send something to a label, pitfalls or smart things that people do?
I would say have a package, have like a concise selection. It really depends on you. First of all, you have to know your audience. You have to know the label you're submitting to. And kind of like, if you see this label submitting or like releasing 3-track EPs, maybe send them 4 or 5 songs and just call it the name of the EP that you want it to be called. I think the more you can put your package together before you send it to a label, like the less work the label has to do, the better, right? So I think that's the best piece of advice I could give, is just to make it as complete as you possibly can before sending it off.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And did you end up discovering anyone who went on to have a platform there?
I can't. It's 10 years ago now.
Yeah, that's fine.
I can't remember. It's so long. I'm sure. Yeah. There's plenty. There's a lot of great artists and a lot of people I met as well through the label that they're still good friends, you know? So,
dude, yeah. I mean, Blaze has been on this podcast a couple times, and I try
really
to check in with him every now and then. Yeah, he's another really interesting guy, man.
Yeah, he's been doing a lot of Vedic meditation.
Yeah. I really don't know. Cool. Did you see that? I didn't realize. I guess he'd been sick for a long time. And
yeah, he got long COVID.
Yeah. And went on really this crazy retreat to kind of get cured. And I think, at least it seemed from the post, I haven't talked to him, that it kind of worked for him. He's starting to feel better. But yeah, shout out to Blaze, man. Hope you're doing good.
Shout out Blaze.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. It was, I just remember because that was all Gainesville. It was like me, VJ, and Blaze. And I was like the young guy because they're both, a few years older than me. And so I've always kind of had friends older than me too. And now that I'm 30, I'm like, holy shit. I can't imagine being friends with someone younger than me.
Well, man, you stick around in this game long enough, it's going to happen.
Sure. There's going to be some cool guys. And there are, like, even on Anjuna, the label that's releasing the album, there's so many cool younger guys doing music. And I see a lot of myself in those guys too.
Sure. Dude, of course. I mean, how did you, maybe we can sort of wrap it up with that. How'd you link up with Anjuna?
Yeah. So this was 2019 was kind of when I had been talking to, so Hannah started streaming on her Twitch, and we had been just like mutual LA friends for a while. Her partner, Mike, is a good friend of mine, and he noticed that we were kind of listening to the same music, and he was like, oh, you guys should get together and do a session. We did the session, and we were all into the same music, and we decided, okay, our favorite label is Anjunadeep, and so let's write 3 songs and send it to them and see if they pick it up, and then if they don't, then there's plenty of other labels to send music to. So we set a deadline and we wrote the music and we sent it off and they signed it. And then by the time that EP was coming out, I was like, we should write a second one, and send it to them as well. And then they picked that up too. And then the pandemic happened and then all that. Then through that, just as time went on, I figured I wanted to write an album and I sent that to them as well. And they picked that up. And yeah, I was really excited because I've been a fan of them for a while. So
yeah, they're great. No, they're great, man. And I think it's a great fit because they put out a pretty wide range of interesting music, I think. And what I like about the story of you linking up with them, from what you just said, is that it all kind of came out of this moment of just connecting with a friend, making something fun, and then, you know, realizing that, oh, hey, maybe this fits somewhere. And then from that, a full-fledged relationship, you know, starts. But it all kind of comes back to just like a moment of hanging out with a friend, you know, and that it doesn't have to be that much more complicated.
It was, I definitely feel thankful to have a friend that's such an amazing singer.
Well, yeah, that helps.
It's like such a monster in the studio. It's so badass when she's like, just gets on the mic. It's like, I'm always blown away every time. She's been singing forever, and she's just like, I feel like you can always tell when someone is a well-trained singer versus someone who just has a really good voice and, you know, wants to be a singer. There's a level of just mastery that comes with the time that you train your voice, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's what we were talking about before. It's, you know, actually putting in the physical hours of it and then still being able to be excited and creative and not just mechanical with it after all of those hours, right?
100%.
Man. Well, is there anything else that we should talk about? Anything else on your mind? Anything else you want to get out there before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I mean, I just plugged the album, you know, it comes out April 5th on all platforms, and it's my first vinyl release, which is really exciting.
Oh, that's cool.
I remember when I was going to see my cousins in Italy, they would just be putting on vinyl all the time. And that's kind of goes full circle for me that way too. So that's really nice.
Oh, that's so cool.
It sounds really good on vinyl. So I have pressings downstairs that I listened to it. And I was like, oh man, I'm so excited.
Yeah, man. Anything else?
Thanks so much. I mean, no, it was really nice to talk to you. I hope we could talk again soon.
Yeah, same here, man. Anytime.
You make it a very enjoyable experience. It's like talking to an old friend.
Ah, that's really nice to hear, man. I feel the same way. They're not all as enjoyable as this one, so I appreciate you too.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well, no, dude, this is great. The album's great. Stoked to get out there, and you know, as people listening heard us talk about your excitement for DJing as well, going back on the road has got to be stoked too.
Yeah, I'm planning on making a bunch of edits. I'm really excited. Gonna probably not play too much of the by the time I start touring, I'll probably just be playing the new unreleased stuff rather than the album stuff. So
well, you know, you can always do some VIP edits, you know.
Yeah. We'll sprinkle them in, make it work.
Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, dude. And yeah, hope to talk again soon or see you out there.
Yeah, and when I come to DC, we should link up.
Please do, man. Yeah, let's grab some food, whatever you want. Let's do it.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Cool.
I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, take care, man.
Peace.
Peace.